As we all know, the moment a bunch of people wearing animal skins get together with a few spears, mammoth and saber-toothed tiger suddenly stopped being such a problem. Humanity's greatest strength has always been communication and cooperation. Every opportunity we get in life walks on two legs. But what if the only thing another human can offer you now is a bullet or a place on the menu? Today we are going to answer one question. Is man, even completely alone, still capable of sitting at the top of the food chain? Or at the top of a sandwich waiting to be eaten by something far more savage? Tony Ravioli, the scientist chronically underpaid around boy over at Yantar, had been sent on what was supposed to be a perfectly ordinary reconnaissance mission around the laboratory, before the Zona abruptly decided that consciousness was in fact optional. The next thing he remembered was opening his eyes in the middle of a crowd of zombies and snorks. Well, the area was clearly anything but safe, and to make matters worse, somebody had switched the psi meters back on. Fortunately, our hero happened to be wearing the last remaining psi protection helmet, so he wasted no time sprinting back to the bunker, where nobody was waiting for him. No doctor, no mechanic, no guards. Considering my current options consisted almost exclusively of mud, radiation and The Walking Dead, running to the rookie village suddenly sounded like the closest thing to a solid life plan. The bar was completely out of the question anyway. The last thing I needed was duty spotting an able-bodied human and decided that today's recruitment quota had my name written all over it. Those idiots have apparently yet to discover hobbies beyond endless warfare. The garbage wasn't much different. There wasn't a single living soul around, aside from two blind dogs who didn't even have time to think about attacking me before they each caught a bullet. Sorry, I'm just way too paranoid for that. Along the way, I looted every stash I could find, and the rewards were surprisingly solid. 5 minutes into the game, I'd already found a basic tools kit along with a couple of loot boxes. Corden wasn't in much better shape either, although I did eventually find someone over at the farm. I may have interrupted whatever little gathering they were having because the farm's new residents started walking out one by one to see who had arrived. Your death has arrived, gentlemen. After relieving the deceased of their belongings, adding a collection of broken rifles and somebody's underwear to my inventory, I stumbled across yet another toolkit and discovered that, apparently, you need permission to use a workbench. From who? This is the Day of the Living Dead. After putting down Jacka Perp, who had apparently decided to stretch his back while sliding across the dirt, along with the rest of his buddies, I searched the tent and found nothing less than a welding machine and a mallet. The village was empty and Sidorovic's bunker had been sealed shut behind a massive steel wall. And honestly, I think humanity wins in that trade. The last thing this apocalypse needs is that old bastard discovering the surface world still owes him money. Either way, the zone had definitely changed because for some reason it started snowing right in the middle of summer. Before calling it a day, I decided to make one final supply run through the neighboring areas, starting with the middle, where I managed to stockpile a respectable amount of canned food and an equally respectable dose of radiation. From there, I drifted into Dark Valley, eventually stumbling across a zombie checkpoint whose occupants, after a brief exchange of gunfire, kindly donated the most aggressively worthless collection of loot I had seen all day. To be fair, zombies are surprisingly well stocked when it comes to food, but passing up free boar meat simply wasn't an option. Turns out I wasn't the only one with similar idea. His buddy apparently decided that revenge would taste best if it involved eating my meat instead. But on my fourth try, I finally forced him onto a vegan diet. The bandit base was just as empty and depressing as everywhere else, so I used the power of telekinesis to loot supplies out of lockers, found yet another set of tools, but more importantly, I found this. Now we can chop wood. I have absolutely no idea what that's actually useful for, or what tree I was supposed to chop in just now. But more importantly, I can finally fight properly in melee instead of waving around a knife that barely cuts the air. Oh, and I completely forgot to pick a class. Obviously we're going with the Monster Hunter path. It fits this playthrough perfectly. Now then, let me ask you a question. Haha, take that, motherfucker. Yeah, that's how the axe works. Wonderful. The zombies' inventories honestly look better than mine. Oh, you piece of shit, am I hitting you with a handle? Either way, if this is what melee combat is going to look like, we are definitely keeping that shovel. I don't think I'm going to survive for very long. After clearing another group of zombies at the flea market with a rifle that jams every other shot, I loaded my already broken back with everything and decided to spend the night at the depot. We'll figure out what to do tomorrow. Waking up with a dumb smile on my face, I headed for agroprom in weather so unbelievably miserable, it chilled me right down to my balls. The plan was simple, scout the area and hopefully find some decent loot. Instead, I mostly found an ass kicking. A dog beat me in the ass, a group of zombies repeatedly introduced my face to their fists, and together they made it clear that I wasn't exactly welcome here. No, not you. No one invited you. Overall though, the trip wasn't a complete waste. I found several loot boxes, sewing kits, medical supplies, and discovered that the local population carried an impressive variety of pharmaceuticals in their pockets. At this point, zombies are basically walking pharmacy piñatas. After swallowing enough pills to repair my shattered knees, and spending every 5 minutes fighting my own carry weight, because apparently it never occurred to my room temperature IQ brain to stash my loot somewhere, I stripped the old military base of everything that wasn't nailed down. Right as I was leaving the area, I ran into a group of armed zombies. The local gang clearly wasn't thrilled about me hanging around on their land, but honestly, who cares what a bunch of brain-fried idiots think? Especially once those brains have bullet holes in them. Now it was finally time to head for the bar and hopefully find somewhere to settle in. Watching my attempts to eliminate a pack of dogs with a double-barrel shotgun that's held together by prayers is honestly hilarious. So I pulled out my trusty companion and with one well-placed swing turned our four-legged friends into tomorrow's goulash. Our two-legged friends were next. Once inside the bar, I collected every bit of food and water that hadn't already disappeared, including the famous Zone sparkling water. I guess the Stalkers built themselves a bottling plant somewhere in Chernobyl. Resourceful. With my medical supplies now expanded, it was finally time to think beyond the next 5 minutes. As you can see, we can craft weapons and armor here, but we'll need higher tier tools for that. We already have plenty of spare weapon parts, and who knows, maybe sooner or later we'll stumble across a rifle with a green barrel. For the night, I claimed the barman's office. I've always wanted to live like that fat bastard. If the world's ending anyway, I might as well enjoy the luxury. After clearing out the unwanted guests in a manner that was probably deeply insulting to their dignity, I decided it was finally time to return to Yantar. Hopefully, I'd find at least one surviving scientist, or at the very least, some clue explaining why the Psy installations were still running and producing so many zombies. The pseudodogs, meanwhile, had a much simpler plan. My testicles were apparently worth investigating. After putting down 20 kilograms of pure aggression, I also took care of a group of gentlemen who looked thoroughly tired of life, along with 2 snorks who had clearly missed human company and were literally jumping for joy, eager to give me a hug. The one creature that actually managed to tear my ass apart, though, was a bloodsucker. Not once, but twice. By the third encounter, I was done playing games. I just wanted to wrap his intestines around my axe like spaghetti. Apparently, the sucker sensed I was serious this time because it simply vanished into thin air and never showed up again. Along the way, I found plenty of useful loot in stashes, crates and the occasional pile of gas, while Yantar itself welcomed me with an entire platoon of zombies, forcing me to spend almost every round of ammunition I had. The amount of loot they dropped was equally impressive, and it finally gave me an idea for the next stage of my plan. I still have no idea why the brain scorches are active again, but one thing is obvious: if I can shut them down, maybe this whole nightmare ends. Unfortunately, in my current condition there is no chance I'm diving into mutant-infested laboratories. That leaves us with only one option: grind until I'm strong enough. I suppose it's time for a montage. The next morning I decided to start the day with a proper home-cooked meal. What's better than nicely grilled pork, boar, dog and pseudo-dog? I'm living like a king, honestly. Not to mention that after 4 hours of gameplay I finally found the advanced tools, which massively expanded my crafting options. Still, before moving on, I figured I'd take a look around the nearby red forest. As it turned out, that would become one hell of an adventure. The moment I stepped into the red forest, I was greeted by the unmistakable soundtrack of absolute industrial-scale violence. Whether the zombies had spontaneously declared civil war or simply found something else to hate for a few minutes, I honestly couldn't tell. What I could tell was that the instant I entered the picture, every single one of them suddenly remembered the incredible value of teamwork. The next time around, instead of waiting for them to gather into one massive horde, I activated full lumberjack mode and turned everything around me into minced meat. Aside from one minor incident where a crowd of zombies trapped me inside a train car, I'd say I successfully reminded everyone exactly who sits at the top of the food chain. Right up until the real boss showed up. Oh no! After somehow surviving on my second attempt, I returned to base, got some sleep, along with a healthy dose of nightmares, and decided that it was finally time to sew myself a proper suit. By combining a pair of smelly boots, torn gloves, a spool of thread, a few pieces of fabric and plastic, and performing what can only be described as a genuinely satanic ritual using the advanced tools, I successfully brought a nomad stalker suit into existence. Now, I no longer have to worry about radiation or freezing my ass off because my clothes are falling apart. While I was at it, I also crafted a beer detector, just in case I decide to go artifact hunting. Considering how yesterday went, I could still use a bit more strength, better gear, and generally a higher chance of surviving, so today I'm heading off to a handful of brand new locations that somehow appeared on my map. I must have mixed up one of my mod folders and accidentally dumped them into my game, but honestly, I'm curious to see what's out there, and maybe we'll even come back with something useful. First though, I have to deal with a few uninvited guests who, judging by the circumstances, had come to pay a visit to the graves of their fallen comrades. Based on the brightness currently burning my retinas to a crisp, the town usually appears to be some sort of purgatory. Thankfully, turning the brightness down just a little immediately restores that wonderfully gloomy shade of grey every Stalker player feels strangely at home in. Well then, back to work. One building after another, one zombie after another. There's loot scattered absolutely everywhere, and I even stumbled across a repair kit for ancient rifles. Could this finally be the day I graduate from pretending the Makarov is a primary weapon? The local boards unfortunately never lived long enough to find out. They clearly weren't expecting this level of agility from a homeless man wielding an axe, and that mistake is about to earn them the prestigious honor of becoming my breakfast, lunch and dinner, before eventually continuing their journey through the digestive system. Never underestimate your enemies, my friends. Luckily for me, the Chimera ran into some kind of invisible mental barrier and simply refused to step over a corpse. I took that opportunity to get the hell out of there, only to run straight into a controller who was calling me with Sauron's voice. Either my axe had been forged in the fires of Mount Doom, or the guy was just really committed to the cosplay. Either way, he never posed much of a threat. He wasn't carrying the ring either. Well, look who finally decided to show up. Edward Railhands. Where the hell have you been all this time? By the time my backpack was overflowing with loot, the weather had taken a turn for the worse. The truck cemetery greeted me with the most brutal snowstorm and rainstorm I'd ever seen in Stalker, leaving me with very few options besides freezing my ass off. So I sprinted back to the bar, thawed my balls out, and continued on toward the prom zone. There honestly wasn't much of interest here. A few odds and ends around the train station, plenty of zombies, snorks, and several areas that were simply impossible to reach. Pretty much the only thing I kept finding was ass-kickings, which I'm not really in the market for. Still, there was something oddly peaceful about these ruins, almost calming. Why do I hear boss music? A gigantic wall of muscle with a forehead thick enough to stop artillery fire is definitely not something you want to meet while carrying nothing but a PM in your pocket. That left me with only one option: die with honor, axe in hand. And that's exactly what I did, the first time. What I couldn't help but notice though was that I was swinging this axe like Kratos himself. After putting all 27 of my IQ points to work, I finally spotted an opening. Every time this big bastard slammed the ground like it owed him money, he stands still for a couple of seconds, and those couple of seconds were more than enough to sprint in, bury an axe between his eyes, and get the hell back out. Repeat until successful, and just like that, here I stand, the first Stalker in history to kill a pseudo-giant in melee combat. Shame nobody was there to witness it. Back at the base, I immediately repaired a M1 rifle. At last, I'm officially a World War II infantryman. What a piece of shit, even the PM hits harder. Yes, I had finally gathered enough confidence to head into Laboratory X16 at Yantar. After clearing the area outside, I charged downstairs with the same determination a dachshund has when it spots a rabbit hole. My axe showed absolutely no mercy, leaving behind nothing but piles of intestines. Zombies, snorks, bloodsuckers, poltergeists, none of them escaped my wrath. An unstoppable force had met a very traversable laboratory. That is, until I ran into another pseudo-giant inside a narrow sewer tunnel. As you can probably imagine, there isn't much room for dodging and jumping around. 5 times in a row, I got flattened beneath several hundred kilos of mutated ass. On the 6th attempt, the guy outplayed himself. If I manage to solve even that fight, then honestly, nothing in this zone scares me anymore. The only downside was that my suit got completely wrecked again, but luckily, I still had enough junk lying around to craft another one. So after sewing together what can only be described as a potato sack, I packed my things and headed back to the Red Forest. I've got unfinished business there, and my kill streak isn't ending today. The Chimera, on the other hand, wasn't going to be nearly as straightforward. The bitch is ridiculously agile, so simply chasing her is not an option. The only reliable way to deal any damage is to dodge her leap at just the right distance. Close enough that you can immediately run in and land a hit, but far enough that she doesn't cave your face in the moment she lands. You can also try backing her into a corner, forcing her to stop and turn around before she can leap again. All things considered, I was boring for nothing. The bitch goes down surprisingly easily, and I killed her on my very first attempt.
I'm sorry, little one. You are simply bad product.
Now that my honor has been restored and my PP has grown a couple of inches, it was finally time to head to the Brain Scorcher on radar. Astonishing demands, I was greeted by 3 bloodsuckers, which I could actually see thanks to this ability. The real surprise came after I shot the machine down. A monolith squad had been dispatched to intercept me. Wait, am I actually looking at normal people? Not that I'm particularly happy about it, and not that they qualify as entirely normal people anymore, but still. The only problem is that against elite soldiers armed with top-tier rifles and exoskeletons, all I have is an axe, a Makarov, and a rifle that delivers approximately the same stopping power as my grandmother throwing a slipper. Then again, who said that wasn't enough? Obviously, Monolith has been keeping a low profile, otherwise I would have been running into them around every corner. Whatever's happening here is clearly more complicated than I first thought, and I'd better start preparing for one hell of a fight. After a day like that, collapsing into bed seems like the smartest decision I'd made in a while. I just wish I hadn't woken up. Am I fucking high? Either I'd somehow become one with the Zone, or the Zone had accepted me as one with its own. They weren't attacking me or anyone, they were simply trying to show me into the nearest wall. Well, there actually is an explanation. It's this perk that spawns two friendly pseudodogs to fight alongside me. Instead, they dedicate their entire existence to getting under my feet at the worst possible moment. Sure, it's nice that every other dog in the Zone ignores me now, but honestly, I'd rather lock these two idiots in a kennel. Easier said than done, though. I barely managed to trap one of them, while the other one apparently entered a deep meditative state and refused to move another inch for the rest of eternity. Using the repair kits and spare parts I'd collected, I finally managed to put together a fully functional but still full as shit AK-47. Gunfights no longer scared me. My suit, however, had zero durability and offered roughly the same level of protection as a plastic grocery bag, so gunfights still scared me. Since I didn't have enough resources left to craft another suit, I packed what little dignity remained, threw on a gas mask, grabbed my freshly assembled Kalashnikov, two unemployed pseudodogs, and with 80% of my torso exposed, went wandering to the northern zone looking for spare parts. As you might imagine, this particular dress code absorbs radiation with roughly the same efficiency that a freshman absorbs cheap vodka during their very first week in a college dorm. The only way to survive under those conditions is to consume enough chemicals to rival your roommate's medicine cabinet. Even the zombies aren't reacting to me. Maybe I really have become one with the zone. What the fuck? By the time I reached Pripyat, those two dogs had finally succeeded in accomplishing what countless mutants could not. They broke me. In a moment of pure psychological self-defense, I buried my axe in both of them, instantly sacrificing my diplomatic relations with the canine population of the zone in exchange for preserving what little remained of my sanity, a trait I would happily make again. Pripyat itself introduced me to the local sheriff, a controller possessing enough psychic power and apparently enough grip strength in his dominant arm to rip my head clean off. His entourage wasn't particularly welcoming either. After reducing roughly half of Pripyat's original population to corpses, I searched the outskirts for stashes, praying to God I'd finally find the expert tools. But God had left this place long ago. I still walked away with plenty of loot, including another rifle repair kit, which wasn't bad at all, but night was falling and I decided to spend it inside the laundromat. What happened next is honestly difficult to explain. A lone monolith soldier wandered into my hideout looking like he'd chosen suicide by Stalker. Searching the body turned up something far more interesting than I expected. Besides the usual loot, he was carrying the expert tools I'd been searching for, a high-end PDA displaying a critical monolith system error, a waypoint leading to the generators, and a note: "Stabilize the system, need assistance." None of that was on my bingo card, but it definitely had my attention. Whatever was waiting at the generators, it sounded like it might finally explain what the hell was happening. Before that though, I needed to head back to base and rebuild my equipment, and fortunately I now had everything I needed. I am now the proud owner of an excellent handmade suit, a resurrected Aim-4A1, and a proper sidearm that won't give me tetanus just from picking it up. Ammo is still a bit scarce though, so the AK stays with me for now. I also repaired the NKA Mastodon I'd found in a loot box ages ago, a single-shot anti-material rifle disguised as a sniper. Given everything that was happening, moving closer to the CNPP seemed like the obvious choice, so I settled into the basement of the old monolith base. After spending one night there, however, I realized I'd chosen to sleep directly underneath the zone's never-ending zombie migration road, along with this guy. For the second time, the oversized chimpanzee was thoroughly outplayed, crippled and put down just like his buddy back at the stadium, weakest boss in the game. The CNPP meanwhile welcomed me exactly the way you'd expect. Apparently the zone had finally grown tired of my arrogance and responded by throwing 3 pseudo-giants at me simultaneously. Thankfully, putting 3 of them together didn't triple their IQ. One by one, I chopped their walking foreheads down before turning my attention to a chimera, only for a controller to politely inform me that he could in fact see me. Fuck. Sensing my cortisol levels skyrocketing, the chimera took the opportunity to avenge her recently deceased relative. Nobody ever said this would be easy. So I repeated the entire sequence from the beginning, except this time I introduced the controller to a large caliber round from a comfortably safe distance. Then I turned the very same rifle toward the chimera. After that, all that remained was one last pseudo-giant. A specimen that had clearly been skipping meals for most of its life, but had somehow redirected every missing calorie into jumping ability. Once he'd been dealt with, I finally reached the generators. Oddly enough, there wasn't a soul inside. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean the place was welcoming. The first obstacle came in the form of a minefield, which I attempted to solve using grenade. Unfortunately, the mine survived, my game did not. So after recovering from an unexpected trip to the desktop, I simply walked around the fence, slipped into the facility, opened the laboratory doors with the most elegant way possible, and finally managed to restart the central reactor. Suddenly, the controller appeared, wanting to know who had been eating from his bowl, sleeping in his bed and moving his levers. The bastard immediately demonstrated an impressive understanding of close-quarter combat by relieving me of every weapon I was holding. I'm telling ya, that guy knows Aikido. Escaping back to the surface did not exactly improve my day either. The second I stepped outside, 2 chimeras landed directly on my tail, which has a negative impact on my quality of life. Fortunately, modern ballistics remain a wonderful equalizer, and the second chimera earned herself a proper 1v1 fight. Tonight the music seems so loud, I wish that we could lose this ground. And I'm never gonna dance again, guilty if it has got no rhythm. After I stopped singing the careless whisper, I headed back home, restocked my supplies, upgraded my equipment and finished assembling this strange little firearm that can't seem to decide whether it wants to be a pistol or a rifle. Almost immediately afterward, an entire zombie army decided to pay me a visit. That was the moment I finally stopped pretending there was still time. Waiting any longer simply wasn't an option. I still had absolutely no idea what rebooting the monolith system was actually going to do, but every instinct I had was telling me that leaving it alone would only make everything worse. The entrance to the sarcophagus had been barricaded so thoroughly that it looked like the duty general who assaulted the CNPP had personally decided nobody was ever getting through again, which naturally made me wonder, did anyone inside actually survive? An entire crowd of professional pants pieces stood between me and the entrance, and there was absolutely no chance I was wasting half my ammunition supply chewing through that mess. Thankfully, the zone had thoughtfully parked this beauty nearby. Sometimes Grand Theft military vehicle really is the optimal strategy. Inside the sarcophagus, exactly as I'd expected, the last remnants of monolith were still wandering around. Judging by both the smell and the atmosphere, fresh air hadn't reached this place in years, and the entire facility had quietly evolved into the public toilet. I decided to improve the ventilation situation by introducing several additional air holes into every fanatic unfortunate enough to stand between me and my destination. Only then did I finally stand before the monolith itself.
System activation requires an uncorrupted consciousness.
Of course it does. Well, apparently the only way to breathe life back into this machine is by offering it the one thing I probably can't afford to lose anymore. My own mind. Hopefully the new monolith inherits my personality. Screw it. Here goes nothing. Hello, Tony. I mean, hello, Tony. Knock it off. Everyone knows it's my voice. Yeah. So, what did you think of your journey? I imagine you've got plenty of questions. Have a seat. I'll stand. So you are the monolith, and that Russian Jesus was just a disguise. Correct. Every time I start a new simulation, I try to stay as close to every part of the zone as possible. I want to witness as much as I can with my own eyes. And as you have probably noticed, brainwashed monolith soldiers and zombies are not exactly ideal candidates for observation. Wait. Simulation? Yes. After C-Consciousness ended up floating in those glass tubes like pickles in a jar, nobody was left to give me a purpose. So I got bored, and I decided to study people. And what's a better way to study people than creating different scenarios and watching how they react and what they choose? I've been present in every story. When people were uncovering Steelwork's secrets, during that modest fever dream, when they were buying weapons from Velasquez while he was slowly lost himself to greed and the fear of becoming nobody. I even tried writing a story in Stephen King's style. Didn't turn out particularly well, should admit. The only time I decided to let everything play out on its own and simply watch where human ambition would lead ended in disaster. The situation slipped out of my control, but I have to admit, that made it even more interesting. That's why I needed your help. I was barely holding the system together. I barely had enough strength left to send even one soldier to your aid. The rest were simply running on inertia. So, I'm not real? It's all just an illusion? Depends on how you look at it. Who's more real? A person in your world who lives entirely out of habit and can't even choose what time to go to bed because every day repeats the last. Or you? You have spent this entire journey making choices. Where to go, what to eat. You decided to kill a pseudo-giant with an axe. You choose to sacrifice yourself. You even choose not to sit down on that chair. And now the world will forever remain one where you choose to stay standing. In that case, you are more real than many people outside this place. Well, that's something. One question, why doesn't your mouth move when you talk? I got hit with an RPG, what do you expect? Fair enough. And why can't anyone use your workbench even after paying you? Please don't even start. Okay. So, what's the next simulation going to be about? That is for them to decide. But I'm grateful for your help, and I'm glad you choose exactly what you choose. I'll give you another chance in my next scenario. So the zone is nothing more than a testing ground for your experiments. Maybe. What is the zone to you? Nothing. Everything. What a nice day. Huh? Fuck.